I implore those that might be listening or watching to this from your audience, if they hear this, that it doesn't matter what you did. What was does not have to be. Go into it with a fresh set of eyes and think about your last 3 most successful hires. What was the process? What was the timeline? That's part one, is have an effective game plan, get it in writing, and make sure for those key decision makers that they all are bought into that process.
Tips from Trestle is brought to you by eMenu Choice Point of Sale, Wizox AI, and Clark Pro. Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality Podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. My goal for this podcast: educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living. How? By bringing the resident and customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. On today's Tips from Trestle, I'm chatting with Chris Heinz. Chris is the president and managing partner of Westport One, a leading executive search firm specializing in senior living leadership talent. With over 27 years of experience, Chris is a thought leader and keynote speaker in recruiting and senior living, having helped fill hundreds of critical leadership roles across various care environments. An avid endurance athlete, Chris has completed nearly 300 races and raised significant funds for charities close to his heart, including Dementia Care and Shriners Hospital for Children. Married for 26 years with 2 college-age children, Chris brings optimism, unique insights on talent recruitment, and a passion for making a difference. Chris, thanks for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Aaron.
Yeah, I am looking forward to getting into the nuts and bolts to help our listeners know more about interviewing and hiring. But I have to know, how did you get into senior living recruitment? It seems like a super specialized field with somebody with your background. So I'm curious where you got your start.
Absolutely. It really goes back to how I got into recruiting. And nobody that I've ever met decided one day they were going to wake up and they wanted to be a recruiter. Okay. There's no college class for recruitment. There may be for HR and organizational development, but not for recruiting.
Yeah.
I really got into recruiting because I wanted to be able to help people and I want to be able to impact companies. Of course, I did not know those were the 2 things I wanted to do when I got into it, because you didn't know anything about the industry.
Right.
But this was going back to the 20th century, 1997, when I first got into the industry. Flash forward to 2010, we were developing our healthcare practice within our organization, Westport One, and we started seeing some of the numbers and some of the trends for the senior living industry. And just like the naivety that's out there in the industry, so many people think of senior living as the nursing home that smells like a hospital that no one wants to go in because nobody comes out.
Yep.
Well, through research, I realized that was so far from the truth. And I saw the real value that the communities had to help seniors live a fruitful and prosperous life when they weren't able to do it in their own home or chose not to do it in their own home. So I really went all in from a research consumption standpoint and became truly fascinated with the industry. I helped develop the practice for other people within our team as the operations director of Westport One. And then come into 2014, I dove in 2 feet forward and actually got into the industry myself, helping develop the practice nationally even further. So long story there, but really it came from the amazement about what this industry provides to the seniors.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to my realization of what the hospitality and customer service side of senior living needed when I got into it. Because I always thought of it as, well, I'm going to do this as a temporary job until I can get my real hospitality job. And
Sure.
Here I am, we'll just say decades later.
Yeah.
So I want to dive in because you have hired and helped recruit so many individuals over your 27 years. And so I think what our listeners can gain from your experience is kind of your insights on what they need to do to create a really great interview process, what that hiring looks like, and just kind of talking through getting from that point A to point B. And so I'd love for you to start by kind of talking to us a little bit about how employers can design an interview process that is going to balance speed and thoroughness without sacrificing decision making.
Absolutely. Let me first clarify the type of roles that we fill, because I don't want to have any misnomer that this type of process would be recommended for certain roles. Our expertise and our success over all the years has been at the community leadership and up. So from community leadership to regional leadership to corporate leadership. So these type of examples I'm going to provide would not be recommended for care level, for concierge, for dining, for all the roles that are so critical to organizations. But these steps are not recommended for that. The speed in those had to be drastically different than what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to note it. I spoke with a gentleman from Hierology, and we talked about that frontline process. And I think it's very different, like you're going to describe. So
That's right.
yeah.
So from that community leadership and up level, speed seems to be a very different defined word amongst the leaders in our industry.
Yeah.
Because to one CEO or executive VP or VPO, they think speed is, well, we hired someone and it took us only 6 weeks. The magic word in there was only. And to the next exec, we hired someone and it took us, I cannot believe it took us 9 days. They are mad at 9 days.
Yeah.
So speed is in the eye of the beholder of what that word actually means. So what I can provide is some absolute evidence of companies who win by getting the individuals they want to fill the roles versus those that have lost out on those individuals because of their process. And you said something magical in your setup there of, in order to make sure that they aren't losing what they believe is a effective process, making sure that they have the right people involved. And we'll touch on that for just a moment, and then we can talk about timeframes. The right people involved are two different things, because there are those that need to be involved, absolutely unequivocally must be involved in the decision-making process. And then there are those that we would like to have involved, but they are not decision makers. So there's a time and place for when those should be into the process of hiring somebody. And onboarding is an incredible time to make those interactions happen. And that's sometimes where the hiccups and the speed bumps occur, is wanting to make sure everyone is involved in the process. And have you tried to herd cats before, Aaron?
I have. Well, I'm in food service, so technically no, but yes.
Okay. So to my knowledge, other than that Super Bowl commercial from a couple of years ago where they are herding cats, it is really, really challenging from what I hear. And that is the very example of trying to get 6, 8, 10 people together for an interview process. So there's the multiple areas we could go to here, but let's just talk from big picture. There is zero reason, barring catastrophe, that a company should not be able to have an interview process completed in 8 to 10 days. And some may have their eyes bug out of their head when I say that type of time frame. But there is no reason, if this interview and this hire is as critical as every company knows they are, whether it's the executive director, the regional director, the sales director, the dining director, if that role is vacant, every day that role stays vacant could be another 3 weeks before it gets filled, because you could lose the person who could accept the job in a reasonable time frame, and now you're 3 weeks later before you find the next one that is close enough.
Yeah. One thing I'm curious about is, why do some operators or some leaders feel like they've got to get this all hands on deck mindset about interviewing a department leader or a community executive director, because very important positions, but you don't necessarily need to have every single person.
That's
And
right.
so that mindset, why is it there?
It's there for a couple of things. From a culture standpoint, they want people to have empowerment. They want everyone to be involved in the decision. But once you start getting too many people involved in the decision and one person raises a yellow flag, let's say, now what do you do? To try to get a majority vote versus a unanimous vote on somebody is really, really challenging. So that's why it's so key to make sure you have the key decision makers, those that must be involved as an actual decision maker, and everyone else is there to make sure that the onboarding is done effectively. And even in the onboarding, if a yellow flag is raised, it doesn't mean the person shouldn't be hired or an offer should be rescinded. It just may mean, okay, we need to make sure we have another conversation so they understand what will be a good game plan versus just sticking your head in the sand and hoping it's going to work. So, yeah, companies, whether it's I'll use the executive director as as a perfect example. Okay. We've had organizations that want to have the rest of the community leadership team involved in the interview process. So you're going to have 6 other leaders interviewing the person who could be their potential boss. And is there possible that 1, 2, or 3 of them may go, ooh, they might hold me accountable. I don't like them. I need a player coach.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to happen. Should they be involved in the process? Yes, but part of the process is the onboarding after they've accepted the job, before they come to work, getting the get-togethers together then. That is a great time, 1, to keep the company and the candidate that they're going to be bringing on board engaged, and 2, to make sure the rest of the team is also engaged in that process. But in the hiring timeline, danger, danger, danger.
Yeah. So when we think about that, what are some first steps that companies can take to streamline their process so they don't have 6 department heads and 3 regionals and 2 C-suite people trying to be a part of the hiring process? So that way you can get the best fit candidates.
Yeah. 2 things they can do. 1 is have a defined game plan. Talk it through with all the key stakeholders of what needs to happen. And I implore those that might be listening or watching to this from your audience, if they hear this, that it doesn't matter what you did. What was does not have to be. Go into it with a fresh set of eyes and think about your last 3 most successful hires. What was the process? What was the timeline? That's part 1, is have an effective game plan, get it in writing, and make sure for those key decision makers that they all are bought into that process. That's part 1. Part 2 is have a process master that is in charge of ensuring that that process is followed.
Technology continues to drive changes in senior care, and that includes food service. eMenu Choice is an award-winning point-of-service application for managing the dining function in senior living communities. This mobile, touchscreen-enabled software enhances the dining experience for residents while streamlining processes for staff. The flexibility and functionality of eMenu Choice makes it an effective solution for any type of senior living environment, from independent and assisted living to skilled nursing facilities. It works for production kitchens or restaurant-style service with options for per meal or a la carte pricing, and accommodates a variety of payments, including bill to account, meal credits, and credit cards. Created by a senior care provider with more than a century of experience serving older adults, eMenu Choice eliminates communication barriers between staff and residents while enabling person-centered choices and greater resident satisfaction. eMenu Choice, transforming dining for senior living.
So in organizations, there's usually a variety of people that could be involved. And the process master does not have to be one of those people who are doing the interviewing. And sometimes it's almost better if they are not. The example I could give is when companies utilize somebody like us, a third-party recruiter. We're that process master to ensure that all the steps are followed and that the timeline is laid out, and that if the timeline alters, Without a real understanding, accountability is called out. It's not done in a mean way. It's not done in an abrasive way. It's just a reminder of we explain this process to a prospective candidate. And a candidate understanding what a process is may be the difference in them willing to put their foot into the process versus, hey, are you interested in a job? No, I got a job. Okay, thanks. That's the process. But when
Yeah.
we're able to describe to a candidate that this is going to be a confidential search, they thought so highly of this search that they have laid out a timeline that within 3 interviews and 8 days, they're going to be able to choose the right individual. We'll ensure that this is done in a very timely manner, and we understand that things may happen. But in that timely manner, 8 to 10 days, this process should be completed. Is that something you'd be willing to get on board with? How different of that is, hey, let's get your resume in there and see what they say. It's so much more effective when you lay out the process to them.
You set me up for my next question, which is great. When you think about flipping it over to the candidate side of thing, right? How can those employers be effective in making sure that they understand the process so that way those candidates will be engaged? It's a transparent process. Everybody knows what's expected over those next 8 to 10 days through the hiring.
You said the magic word there, and that's transparency. It doesn't matter if they're using somebody like us. Not all roles are filled by recruiters, obviously. The vast majority are filled by the companies themselves. But it's so much more effective if it's a talent acquisition person, if it's the regional director who's taken over the responsibility, whomever is in charge of the process and dealing with the candidates, let them know what the process is. If they know what the process is and they turn out to being one of your leading candidates, you have a much greater chance of them being willing to hang on for a day or two when they are dealing with another interview process. Because you might be shocked by this, Aaron, but good candidates have more than one opportunity.
Yeah.
And if they know that one process is going to be another week versus opportunity number 2 is they don't have a clue how long this is going to go. They've asked a question and they get the old school, oh, well, we're evaluating candidates or you're in the mix. We'll get back to you when we know more information. Which one do you think they're going to latch onto?
Yeah. Do you find that it's candidates treat the broken process or the drawn out process as a little bit more of a red flag for an operation than not?
Yeah, absolutely. And the good news is you can still hire somebody with a broken process. But what you're going to get are the desperate, those that have been around for a very long time, who are willing to do whatever it takes for however long it takes. You are not going to get statistically the cream of the crop, the top 20%, the top 10%, because those people are going to have other opportunities that are more defined, more well laid out, and that the information is communicated to them. So I'm not saying you won't get somebody hired, but you may not get the right candidate hired.
Yeah. I guess that's where this balance of being quick or the speed of hiring and that thoroughness really comes into play because like you said, you can get somebody in that 8 to 10 days, but if you do take longer to be thorough, you may not like the end result.
Yeah. And that's where that process master comes into play because they are given the responsibility to hold everybody accountable to timelines. And the reason that's so critical is everybody's busy in our industry. Most of the leaders, whether it's regional, whether it's the executive director hiring for one of their support leaders, they're all busy. They all have enough things to do to fill an 80-hour work week. And they're trying to get the job done in, let's be conservative, and let's say 50 or 55 hours. And you and I both know that's probably not happening. And now we're adding into the mix, interviewing somebody and possibly interviewing 2 or 3 or 4 misfits before you get to one that you actually get excited about. So once you go through 2 or 3 bad ones, you are going to be less excited about the next one. And now you're going to go, well, I'm kind of busy this week. I could probably get them in Wednesday, Thursday of a week from now. Without that process master saying, wait, we have somebody who you need to interview. When can you do it in the next 24 hours? Very different than when can you do it?
Yeah.
That process master really is the key to landing the great candidates. They're going to be, I can't say long-term, because long-term in our industry or long-term in the professional world is a very different thing than it was 25 years ago. But it's going to be impactful in your organization, and you're going to have the opportunity to keep them long-term. The opportunity is where that keyword is. The opportunity if you do the right things.
When you're an interviewer, what kind of trust do you have to put in that process manager when they say, we've got a great candidate you need to interview in the next 24 hours, especially when you've gone through, like you just said, 2 or 3 where they might have been duds, or maybe they're 75% what you're looking for?
A couple things there that we could kind of peel the onion back on. One is, what is that perfect candidate? The perfect candidate may not be the 100%er, because there are very, very few of those out there. And the typical rule of thumb is, if they match 70% of what you're looking for, interview them. Because if they match 70% of the skills, the thing that pushes them over the top is their passion, their energy, their work ethic. And those are things that do not come out on a resume.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to read past just the words of the resume. No one has ever hired a piece of paper. They hire a human being that wants to do the job, that can be successful and has a track record of doing it before. And those things may not always come out on the resume, because a joke that I usually tell a hiring manager when they look at a resume, they go, oh, they don't have what I'm looking for. I'll ask them, when's the last time you hired a piece of paper? And the other thing I will let them know is, the perfect resume, everything is right. Every word you're looking for is there. Usually means one of 2 things. Either 1, they paid someone way too much money to put it together.
Yeah.
Or 2, they've interviewed way too much. They've been out of work, or they've had job after job after job. The way you get the perfect resume is by doing too many jobs. So the perfect resume does not make the perfect person. A little bit of a rant there. I apologize, but I'm just passionate about that.
No, it makes perfect sense. And I want to fast forward through the process a little bit here. And you're talking about the piece of paper, right? And we know we're all in a hurry. You mentioned it, right? So usually when we get to that end of the process, we're like, great, we've got our person, HR, send them their letter. Let's get them signed. Let's get them moving forward, right? One of the things that when we were prepping for this, you had mentioned was, it's really important to also make that verbal connection. Why is that so important with building excitement for the person, getting those top tier talent in the buildings to take care of our residents?
Yes. If you are hiring an average to mediocre to bottom of the pack individual, you could just send the letter. They're probably going to say yes. But if you truly believe you are hiring an above average to a great individual, you just sending the letter is running the risk of you losing the candidate. Calling them, you are able to show them your excitement level about them coming on board. And those words will never come across in a letter. You could say the words, I'm excited about giving you an offer. Those words don't come across as, I am excited to give you an offer.
Yeah. You can't really put them in all caps.
To be there. Yeah, it has to be there. Now, you can follow up with an offer letter. But here's my recommendation. There is zero purpose in sending somebody an offer letter unless they have verbally accepted. It's a waste of time sending out that email and sending it out there. It's a waste of time if they've not verbally accepted. And that is something going back into the 70s and 80s, where everything was about, you send the offer letter, they tell you if they're going to accept. No. Make the offer verbally. Let them know what your thoughts are of why you think they're a great fit for the role. Make them the verbal offer, and then shut up. Because the next words out of that candidate's mouth will tell you whether you're likely going to land them or not. If the next words out of their mouth are, thanks, and there's a question mark in that word, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
If the next words are, hey, I really appreciate that, let me talk to my spouse. You might be there, but follow up with, is there any concerns you have about this offer? Because this is your opportunity. Again, 2-way conversation. That can't happen in text. That can't happen in a written letter. Two-way conversations. Are there any concerns you have about this offer? Gives you the ability to understand where a possible negotiation may come into play. And that will never happen in written form.
Yeah, I've had this, just something that bothered me, but I would work for operators occasionally, not all, but every now and again, where I would get, this is the salary, this is the range, this is the benefits, this is all we can do. But you always have to approach it as a negotiation, especially if you're trying to get the best talent out there. And so I've always wondered why some would approach it in that way of, all right, just tell them what it is, and that's what's going to happen.
That's right. Yeah. And negotiations can be one of two things. The negotiation should be done in advance of the offer being presented. It shouldn't be the grand show, the grand finale, the song that's going to blow people away. Okay. The offer should be something that has been pre-discussed of what do they need to see in order to accept. And again, utilizing someone like us, that becomes a foregone conclusion. I can't think of one time in the last 2 or 3 years where we presented an offer and it was turned down. The offers are accepted because we have front-loaded this. We have pre-questioned them, pre-qualified of what the number and what the parameters of that offer need to be. Great talent acquisition people, they do that as well. When someone who's not used to hiring potentially hundreds of people a year, they don't go into that mode. So a couple of recommendations that I can give to the people hiring. One is have that conversation earlier on. Ask them the question. If we were to get to an offer, what does the offer need to be for it to be something for you to accept? Understand what their current PTO plan is. The other part of presenting the offer is come with the best offer to the table up front and let them know this is the best offer we can make. Please, please, please don't go in and try to lowball. I understand that companies have salary ranges. They have budgets they have to stick to. And I understand in the day that we live in now, with the vast number of laws that are out there by state and by municipality, that there are many organizations that have to post a job salary range on their posting. That is not written in stone. So when you make an offer, make it the best offer you possibly can for that individual. And let them know that you went above and beyond for them, because that will impress them. And that will also mitigate the chances of them trying to push you even further above and beyond your range. Words matter.
Definitely. So, Chris, as we wrap up here, if there's any great takeaway that you haven't shared or that you want to re-emphasize for the listeners, what would that one great takeaway be?
The thing I'll come back to is time matters. Time makes all the difference. A term that we have is speed to hire. It's an HR term, it's a recruiting term, but it should be a term in every decision maker's thought process when it comes to hiring somebody. Speed matters. Without losing continuity, without losing key decision makers in there, speed matters. And if you take that as an important factor when you're putting together your hiring process and you make sure that you have speed involved, you have the greatest chance to land the right candidate. On the flip side, speed matters when it comes to the candidate. If a company does not have speed involved in their process, you have to question what type of decision-making timeline do they take when you're in the job. Yeah. If they say they'll get back to you in 3 weeks with a decision, is that really going to work when you have a potential life and death situation you're dealing with? I know I'm being a little facetious there with the life and death, but critical decisions, time matters. Yeah. So speed comes both ways.
I think that's a great kind of way to leave this. That speed to hire is a two-way street for
That's
sure.
Right.
So, well, Chris, how can listeners learn more about the work you do and connect with you if they're looking to post or be recruited for a position?
Sure. I'm very active on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to reach me. I try to put something out of quality every day, or at least 4 or 5 times a week. So that's usually the best way to get a hold of me, but I'm always out there. And the thing with me is this is not just about money. Yes, we're all in the business to make a living, right? But yeah. I love the ability that we have in our recruiting world to directly impact companies and help them grow And more importantly, we have the ability to directly impact people's lives. So when you see a post from me, it's really about the impact that we get to have. And I hope that comes across in our conversations like this and the content that I try to put out there.
It absolutely does. So, Chris, thanks so much. I encourage everybody to reach out to you on LinkedIn and connect. And thanks again for this great conversation today on Tips from Trestle.
Hey, thanks so much, Aaron.
So there it is, everybody. Another one in the books. Thanks again for tuning in. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestlehospitalityconcepts.com. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.